This podcast may contain graphic and/or explicit content that may not be suitable for some listeners, especially kids like me. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Real Life Podcast, brought to you by the Thin Blue Line for Women. In this podcast, we open up and talk about real life issues as they relate to first responders. It's raw, it's real, and it's about time. I'm Tamara, your host. Thanks for joining me. COVID-19 has really changed America and changed our world. And I wanted to reach out to you all and say that I hope everyone's doing okay. I hope you're staying at home as much as you possibly can to avoid spreading this highly contagious and easily spreadable virus. Reported illnesses range from mild symptoms to severe illness and even death. It's absolutely horrible. And the symptoms can appear anywhere between 2 and 14 days after exposure. So that's kind of scary. Like if you go to the store because you need something and you get home, then you have anxiety for 2 to 14 days. Anyway, we're going to hear in a quick second from Detective Blue Line. That's his Twitter handle. Detective Blue Line is going to tell us all what he's been doing during this COVID-19.
Hi, this is Detective Blue Line, and I want to say hi. With the quarantine, I have been working, and through work, I'm a criminal investigator with our police department. We've been getting inundated with fraud cases. Also, our patrol unit is down to a skeleton crew right now, so whenever they get a hot call, I throw the vest on, go out and assist them. When I get done work, the first thing I do before I even go in the house is take off my shoes because the shoes actually carry germs. And once I get into the house, I am doing laundry. Everything I wore that day, I make sure I get washed. So basically, my work week is going to work, handling fraud cases, assisting the patrol, coming home, doing laundry, and going to sleep. I hope everyone is staying safe, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
My guest today is Lori Cooper. She's the daughter of a Columbus police officer who was shot in the line of duty in 1972 during a burglary call. Now, she was only 9 years old when this happened. There were 3 burglars, but one of them, named Charles Hayes, fled the area, did not attend trial, and ultimately escaped justice. Lori, thank you for talking with me today.
Hi, Tamara. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good. Can you please walk the listeners through the incident the day your father was shot in 1972?
Absolutely. What happened was there was a neighborhood, just a nice middle-class neighborhood. Back in the early 70s, everybody kind of knew everybody. And these folks, lived next door to each other, and they worshiped together at the same church. And it happened to be Bible study night. And these 3 men took advantage of, these folks being away from home and just went into one house after another, would be in and out in about 8 minutes, and grab, all their possessions that were worth anything to them. And at about the point at which my dad and his partner received the call, my dad and his partner happened upon 2 of the 3 men. The third man was a getaway driver, and a foot pursuit ensued. My father chased, one man, his partner, the other, and it was very dark. It was 10:30 in 1972. There weren't a lot of street lights or anything. And at point blank range, this man with a 9mm, when my dad caught up to him, turned around and shot him. But my dad was smart enough to turn his torso to avoid being struck in the chest, and so he took it in the arm, a through and through shot.
So did they wear vests back then? Body armor?
No, they did
Okay.
not. He had on the old, Tamara, you remember the old, I think here they called them Class A dress uniforms,
Yes.
but they were the double-breasted pea coat,
Mhm.
wool. It was March, it was cold. They were beautiful uniforms. I couldn't imagine armoring up and that along with 30 pounds of gear.
Right,
I
right.
felt so sorry for him every night when he would go to work. I'm thinking, my gosh, he's carrying like 100 pounds on him.
I know.
But
So
no,
he
they
gets
did not.
so he gets shot in the right arm, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And so what happened after that? What happened that
Well,
night?
he had, a 9mm at point blank range, is said to be able to, hurl an object of 250 pounds, so many feet. When you're shot at point blank range, and this as a law enforcement officer, his arm was really barely hanging on. So he was transported to the hospital. He was there for well over a month. They did a number of surgeries on him to try to graft bone from different parts of his body, all on his left side, to put his arm back together to save his arm. And he was in traction and everything. And so eventually he was released from the hospital. He was on light duty. He had to continue to have surgeries. And consequently, he had a left leg then that was, not really at full capacity, a left hip that wasn't. His whole left side was compromised just to, put his arm back together.
Right.
So he did return to the department. Believe it or not, they allowed him to go back on the street for a time for about the next 5 years. And then he went on the inside and worked in the special duty office and the records, division, and then finally retired. But he was never able, Tamara, I just want to just, impress, this upon everybody. When people, and I really need to impress this upon everybody, when people hear that an officer sustained a gunshot wound in the arm, they think, well, he's going to be just fine. Well, no, that's not true. Okay. I go back now. I was 9 years old, and I go back now and I read the reports and I read the news articles, and in which they say the officer's in good condition. No, he wasn't. He was never in good condition after that. Not ever, and neither were we.
Right, right.
So, I can tell you that firsthand. I got to witness how the system works. Okay, and it's unbelievable. It's emotional, and I start to tear up every time I tell this part of the story. But, we were a family that listened to the police radio, as I explained to you, and we didn't watch television. My father worked 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., and they didn't call it mid-watch back then, but that's essentially what it was. It overlapped, second and third shifts. And so we heard here in Columbus, an officer involved, anything, officer down, officer, needs help, is a 10-3 code. And I had already memorized all the 10 codes by the time I was 5 years old, because we were that, just that thick blue blood, family. And so I heard the 10-3, my mom heard the 10-3, and we heard the area, and we knew my dad worked in that area, but we didn't know it was him. And until the phone rings, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table drawing. I'm 9.
Right.
And my mom picks up the phone. We've got the police radio on the back, and on in the background. My mother drops to her knees, literally on the floor, in despair. And then here comes our neighbor behind us barreling through our back door, and our neighbor across the street from us barreling in our front door. And I'm watching all of this, and it was so surreal. And then I happened to look up, our front door was open and we had a really nice storm door, but half of it was, like a window.
Mhm.
And I look up and then I see 2 officers. And so at 9, I'm trying to process all of this because it's just
Right.
happening
Right,
literally,
right.
like within a couple of minutes. It's just, for me, that part is fascinating. Okay. It's extremely emotional, but it's also fascinating because to sit back and watch it, we can watch it on television all day long,
Mhm.
but to actually be involved in it and immersed in it, is just unbelievable. So I look up and, Mary Lou Coleman was our neighbor across the street. And I said, Mary Lou, we have 2 officers at our door. Can somebody let them in? Because my mom, um, our neighbor behind us, she was on the floor with her,
Mhm.
and they didn't in 1972, Tamara. They would not let the family know to what degree the injury was or if the officer was even dead. And the reason for that was because if in the process of transport the officer died, they didn't want to say he's alive,
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah. So we didn't know.
Oh my
And so
gosh, that
my mom has to leave, because the officers are there to transport her to the hospital.
right,
And we don't even know if my dad's dead or alive.
right, right.
So, about the point at which my mom left is when I
Okay.
became unglued
Right.
because I didn't know, like my dad was my hero
Mhm.
and I did not know. I'm so sorry. I get
No,
emotional when I tell this
this
aspect of
is
the story,
fine. It's called real life. I wanted your story. Go ahead. It's
but
okay.
that's when I became unglued. And
Mhm.
our neighbor, to this day, we are still close with her. I talked to her just the other day. Um, and she was a great source of comfort for me, but by this time it's now like 11 p.m. because my dad was shot at about 10 p.m. that night. And so she thought it best that, I go to bed. And I was supposed to have school the next day. It was on a Wednesday night. Again, the folks that were victimized and burglarized, there were 10 families.
Wow.
Um, you know, they too were just, I mean, we were all victims,
Mhm. Oh, absolutely.
and so she thought it best that I go to bed. Well, I went to bed, but all I could do is lie in bed and just listen to the phone ring, constantly. And Mary Lou answering calls and trying to explain what happened until I finally heard, I don't know, by midnight, I would say that my dad was alive because I had to lie in bed and just wonder, in my little 9-year-old mind.
Right, right.
Um,
That sounds absolutely horrible what
well,
you
and my
went through.
my father did everything that he could to
Well,
protect us, you know what I mean? And to, as a little girl, to teach me certain things. Like he loved boxing, and so he would take me to just local matches and everything. But we loved to watch, the old Joe Frazier and
yeah.
Muhammad Ali, matches, and then George Foreman, and he took me to wrestling matches and all kinds of stuff. So I kind of felt like he tried to make me a little tough or expose me to
Yeah.
certain things like that. But at the same time, I was this little girl. And so, of course, he did everything that he could to protect me from the bad guys,
Right.
and
Now, let me not to take away from what you're talking about and what you're going through right now emotionally, but can we go back to the night of the incident? I
oh,
want to
absolutely.
know. I want to know, did your father get a shot off? Didn't
He
didn't he
did.
shoot the bad guy?
He did. So,
So he shot Charles Hayes, correct?
correct.
The guy that shot him.
Correct.
Okay.
So, my dad in 1961 was the most sought after high school football player in the country. Um, and had earned 79 full ride football scholarships to the best, or the universities with the best football programs.
Now, I know the listeners are going to Google him right now. What's his name?
Nick Cooper.
Okay, go ahead.
And he went to Eastmore High School in Columbus. And so he, had settled on the University of Tennessee. And then he felt this calling to be a police officer.
Gotcha.
He had every opportunity to go to the NFL. In fact, a couple of his classmates did. So he left school and came home and was recruited and joined the Columbus Police Department. But I will tell you that, again, going back to, the shooting that night, it was his athletic ability. He could run like there was no tomorrow. So I used to, as I got older, I would say, and he would tell stories, I would say, oh, that poor B, the ASTARD. I don't want to say it because I don't think you have the bleep, but he would start telling a story and I'd think, oh, that guy, he just didn't have a chance because my dad could run like lightning, So when, this guy took, Mr. I have a really hard time, by the way, using his name. Okay. I usually refer to him as the shooter or that man guy, or whatever.
Suspect.
The bad guy suspect. Right. So when he took off running, he didn't have a chance, but the thing is my dad was running so fast, he literally, ran right into him. That's how fast he was. But the guy already had his gun pulled, So,
okay.
Yeah. So
he
shot, my father shot, and he sees, it's dark. Remember this, Tamara, and viewers try to, or listeners try to envision this. All my dad could see was shiny metal. So he takes his other arm, and grabs for the gun so that this man can't kill him. Right. And, he grabs for it before he could get his 38, out of his holster, and they go to the ground. And
this
then
after they got shot in the arm already?
Yeah, after and he's literally got an arm that's just hanging and barely, connected to his shoulder. And so a ground fight ensues, and he was able to get a shot off that way. But then he lost his gun in the process, and the shooter picked it up and pointed it to his chest and was going to kill him. And thankfully he didn't. So anyway,
so
but
the shot
that my dad got off hit this man in the abdomen.
Okay.
I didn't know it until I began this quest to kind of figure out what happened that night, that my dad's partner had already gotten 2 shots off on this guy when he encountered him in the backyard of the young couple who had come home from Bible study class that night. And when, my dad and his partner got the call, they happened to be pulling, or driving down the street when this car pulled up, and it was this young couple. And when they pulled in their driveway, they knew when their dog wasn't barking that something was up and amiss. And it was these 2 guys that were actually in the backyard trying to get in their back sliding glass door. So my dad's partner took the back. My dad took the front and stayed with the young couple. And then shots were fired. And so my dad's partner got off 2 shots. Well, when Mr. Hayes grabbed my father's police issued .38 revolver and put it to his chest and told him he was going to kill him, he passed out from bleeding. So that's why my dad was still with us. He's not now, but he passed away in December of 2013. And when I got the call from the hospital, and I went to the hospital, they told me that he had a massive stroke on his left side, which left him paralyzed on his left side, and that likely that stroke was from his original gunshot injury and all the subsequent surgeries and all the metal that was in his body.
How old was he when he passed in 2013?
He was 71.
Okay.
But a young 71. Oh, no, thank you.
I'm sorry for your loss. It's
my
your
dad
father
was,
still.
well, he was the type of guy that, you know how you attach immortality to certain people because you think
Hmm.
these people are larger than life, you know?
Yeah.
And that's always the way that I thought about him. So it was a shock, you know?
Right, right. Now, okay, so your father goes to the hospital. You tell us what happens within the next month, all of his
Right,
therapy and
right.
such. And so what happens to this bad guy that your father shot? What, did he go to the hospital? Did he die? Was he alive? What, tell that
Oh, no, he
story.
didn't die.
And,
Oh, hell no, he didn't die.
yeah,
Uh,
tell that story and tell me why he did not go to jail for this. So
okay.
tell that.
So what happened was, I'm still trying to find out how many times this man was shot. My father shot him once. His partner got off at least a couple of rounds. I don't know how many, okay? Um,
So
the
I'm gonna pause you right there. So you're saying that you are still trying to piece all this together all these years later.
Yes,
Okay, I understand their CSI was probably not even CSI back then. They didn't have the ballistics that we do today. They didn't have the crime scene investigation
yes,
techniques
they
that we
did.
do
Well, no, not the
today.
techniques, no.
Right, not the
They
techniques.
right.
So why are you, his daughter, left after all these years to try to piece this together? Why is that happening?
That's
And
a
why wasn't it done back
the
then?
that's a $64,000 question because let me go back to answering your first question, which
Yes.
was, why wasn't he arrested or
Yeah.
was he or what so he was served an arrest warrant. First of all, he was indicted by a grand jury on 14 felony counts,
Of the burglaries, right?
the burglaries and my father's shooting.
Okay, good. Okay.
Um, he was served an arrest warrant in the hospital. He was paralyzed,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Okay.
So, instead of going to court, they bring the indictment and the arrest warrant, and they say that they're going to let him out once he's released from the hospital on an OR bond. That's your own recognizance.
Unrecognizant.
That's like a get out of jail free
Mhm.
card.
Absolutely.
So this happens in Columbus, Ohio. He takes up residency in Lexington, Kentucky. They allow him to even go out of state. They don't think he's a flight risk because he can't walk. Well, what they also did was and I'm still trying to figure this one out too. They negotiated on his behalf an 18-month inpatient residential treatment program. And within 2 weeks of his release of the hospital, and once he's at this facility, they were asking for his driver's license so that they could teach him how to drive a car. Now,
Who's they? Who's they?
okay, let me qualify that. The folks at this residential treatment program, two are head of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and they were asking the state of Ohio to relinquish his driver's license to them so that they could teach him to drive a vehicle with handicap controls. You know, like back in the day, they weren't
All
as sophisticated, those
yeah.
vehicles. But my first question is, well, why the hell would they want to teach a man who's been indicted on 14 felony counts how to drive? Because likely he's going to go to jail, right?
Well, yeah, of course. He's waiting trial right now. And
Correct.
the OR boggles my mind right now. I know that every law enforcement officer listening to this right now is probably really mad right now because that OR, you do not get OR'd for shooting, for
Correct.
any shooting at all.
Correct. Correct. So what happened was he was taught how to drive. My father came home one day from light duty and was extremely upset and said the city of Columbus had provided the car, that this man had threatened to sue the city of Columbus, and they negotiated to give him this car. And the treatment facility used that car and taught him how to drive. And when the 18 months was up, Tamara, he rolled right off of that parking lot in that car and never came back to Columbus again.
But
So
did he have a trial date set? Did he have a court date set?
no, but
So, but that's what happens when you get OR'd. You get OR'd
well,
with a court date.
strike that. He did have a court date because the warrant that I found was for failure to appear. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
So
let
yeah,
me
I
back
was
that
going to
up.
say
Yeah.
there's no way you're going to get
Yeah.
OR to not
Yeah.
have a court date.
Yeah.
Okay. So he never goes to court, never shows up for court.
No, and he runs the country and starts
And
roaming the country
right.
in that car, and he starts committing more burglaries as his new as the new getaway driver. Okay,
Wow.
he forms a
So
new team.
so how many years later did you finally start just investigating this on your own? Like how old were you? You were 9 when this happened.
44 years later.
44 years later, you're like, screw this. I'm gonna get my answers myself. And you just
Right.
decide to start
Well,
Googling things.
my dad would never talk about this. Okay, I
Okay.
can tell you, like, there were 5 times in my whole life until he passed away that he talked about this, and that always raised really big red flags. But I never wanted him to relive the incident,
Mhm.
over and over, because there were times through the years that he exhibited weird behaviors that just were atypical, for him. So
Well, not atypical for a person that's gone through a shooting, for crying out
well,
loud.
no, you're right. But I didn't understand that,
Right.
Tamara. I do
Right. Of course.
now,
Yeah.
but at the time seemed atypical,
Right.
So he passes in 2013, and I go, I go through 3 years of grief. I'm still grieving, but anyway.
Of course.
And then I thought, I'll be damned. So I'm just going to figure out what happened, because my dad's silence occurred, I know, for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been piecing these, parts of the puzzle together, I recognize that he had to have felt very invisible, and that his service really did not matter, because 2 different times throughout the 1970s, this man was rearrested in 2 different states. Governor's extradition warrants were issued. Officers are assigned to go pick him up, and the warrants would get squashed.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And so I'm trying, with all my might. This has been a 3.5-year journey for me, and I'm still putting pieces of the puzzle together.
Okay, before you continue, let's take a quick break, and when we return, I want you to go into detail of what happened that day you decided, I am going to find Charles Hayes.
Okay.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Tamara.
Are you interested in CSI or forensics? The Forensic Science Academy program has been recognized as the premier training program completely dedicated to students who are launching their forensic career. The Academy offers specialized hands-on training modules in basic and advanced crime scene investigation, forensic photography, fingerprint identification and classification, crime scene management, and coroner investigations. Instruction is offered in the form of weekend workshops, online courses, webinars, and seminars. Training at the Academy of Forensic Science will give students the competitive edge employers and agencies are looking for when hiring. Past graduates are now working as crime scene investigators, private investigators, forensic pathologists, coroner investigators, forensic nurses, forensic accountants, and even criminalists. The courses are taught by forensic professionals who are experts in the field and hold membership in the International Association for Identification and other professional forensic organizations. For more information, visit forensicscienceacademy.org. Again, that's forensicscienceacademy.org. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm. Are you looking for thin blue line gear? It's available on our website at thinbluelineforwomen.com. That's thinblueline4women.com. Show your support for law enforcement and get your Thin Blue Line gear today. Just click on shop at thinbluelineforwomen.com. We're back from break. Now, Lori, in 2016, I think that's what made you decide to take matters into your own hands, right?
Right.
And track down Charles Hayes. So tell me about that. Tell me the story of how you found him and what you did with that information.
Well, I had decided, 3 years had gone by. We had settled all of my dad's, probate stuff and his estate and everything. And all of that was finalized. And I thought, okay, well, now is the time for me to go backwards and try to figure out, gosh, was this doctor right? Did he really pass away, from his original shooting injury? And why didn't he talk about this? My dad would come home, Tamara, and tell me the goriest stories, and I would just be sitting at the table, with my, my little, fists, up against my chin, like, oh, Dad, please give me more, And so I'm serious.
I believe you.
And so, and the police radio and the we only watch cop dramas. And so anyway, I thought, okay, well, let me figure this out. So I called the Columbus Police Department and I asked them if they could please, start looking for records or what I needed to do to acquire them. Well, I got a call back from the person in charge of their records who said, well, this happened so many years ago. We found 3, but everything else has been destroyed. And so they tried to give me this, whole records retention, schedule thing. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. My dad's shooting was never resolved. I mean, this man didn't go to trial,
Right.
He's still on the lam, So I thought, I'm not buying that BS, okay?
And there's no statute of limitations on this either.
Correct. In 1972 in Ohio, we had no statute of limitations on any felony charges or any felony warrants, okay? So that wasn't even an issue.
Right.
So I asked if they would please mail me those 3 records. I wanted to see them, okay? Meanwhile, I call the courts. I get the indictment, the indictments. I read those. I read the victims and everything. And that's all I've got, okay? So interestingly, when I received in the mail the 3 records that the Columbus Police Department said that's all they were in possession of, you're not going to believe this, but one of them was the damn warrant.
Oh,
it was
wow.
the warrant for his arrest. And I thought, why wouldn't anybody that would pick up these records look and see this is a warrant? Okay. So I thought, well, I have to do something with this. All right. I can't just let this go. So I got in contact with our prosecutor, our elected prosecutor. I mean, in some jurisdictions, they're called DAs. In our
Right.
jurisdiction, they're called he's
Okay.
called a prosecutor.
At the attorney's office.
Yeah. And so I wrote him an email, Tamara, on a Friday afternoon at 4:30. I'd left a message for him. I thought, I'm never going to hear back from this guy. And at 10:30 that evening, he wrote me back. And he said he's been our elected prosecutor for a number of years. And at the time that my dad was shot, I forget what he was doing. He was, I think, working in a different, office in the capacity of like a junior attorney. But he recalled my dad, of course, his high school football career, his college football career, and that he was a really good police officer. And so he went through, electronically and looked, and he said, I don't see any reason why we can't go forward with this, but I will caution you about one thing. And that is because there were 2 incidences where this man could have been apprehended in the state of Kentucky when he was arrested, and the governor's extradition warrant was issued, and nobody went to pick him up. And then in 1978, he was apprehended in Hartford, Connecticut. This guy drove all over the country. At that time, we could have gone and gotten him then too, but we didn't. And I say we, meaning the state of Ohio.
Mhm.
So he said the only legal thing that we have going against us is that the courts could say that his right to a speedy trial was violated because there were 2 times that we could have gone and gotten him, but we failed to do our job in that regard. And
How
that
frustrating.
that therefore then means we legally prejudiced him. Well, let me just play the violin, okay? Because as far as I'm concerned, if we made a mistake and didn't go get him, well, that just gave him that much more freedom, So, we went through the process, and what we had to do instead of, and this is just so bizarre. But yeah, I had started looking through the internet to find him and everything, before I got the records. And it's just amazing what you can find on the internet. All you have to do is, now he didn't vote, but his wife did. Okay.
Mhm.
So you can go through voting records, you can go through vital statistics and find out dates of birth or dates of death. And those were the things that I used, and the interesting thing though is that he used, his last name is Hays, Hays, but he changed the spelling of it and added an E in it.
Oh, okay.
So Hayes. So all the few records that I had, when I'm looking for this man, I'm looking for a Charles Hayes, right? And I kept finding this guy in Dayton, Ohio, who and he originally was from Dayton, Ohio, and but it was Hays. And so I'm thinking, well, this can't be. And Charles Hayes, I mean, that's kind of a common name,
Mhm. Yeah, right.
So I'm thinking, I'm not finding the right person, And then I went to Vital Statistics. He's not, dead, not under Hays, under Hayes. I had gone on a number of different search engine sites and uncovered a DOB, a date of birth. And I was certain that part was right. I did a lot of researching on his family. I looked on social media sites. I found, his grandchildren, and I confirmed then that his name was actually spelled Hays. So he had used the E, because remember back then technology wasn't what it is
Right.
today. You can spell your name any damn way you want to now,
Yeah.
but with a date of birth, and a social, it doesn't matter how you spell your name, So he used that to thwart off authorities, and it worked in his favor, a few times. I don't know how, but it did. But anyway, the long and short of it is that we had to go through a special proceeding before a judge to determine whether or not we could actually go to trial. And that was to see if, in fact, he was legally prejudiced and his right to his constitutional. Let me preface that, because there's there's the constitutional right to a speedy trial, and then there's just a state's right to a speedy trial.
Okay.
But the judge ruled against us and said that his constitutional right to a speedy trial had been violated.
Okay.
So
So pretty much it's all done. Like it's finished. You can't do anything else.
I was harassed by his family, who are members of the Hells Angels. They
That's scary.
They purport to be related to Charles Manson. Now that Charles Manson is dead, I'm not so much worried. But and I've copied, well, I'm not going to say that. I have been privy to conversations that have been exchanged regarding their relation to Charles Manson. These are not nice people, But what he did was he traveled up. He went from the south and he traveled up the eastern seaboard, and he wound up in a town called Warwick, Rhode Island, which any live PD fans, one of the years they were on, I think the first one, believe it or not, I could not believe this, but they were traveling with the Warwick, Rhode Island Police Department. And I thought, who would figure? Because Rhode Island is like 43 miles in circumference, with a dense population. But that's where he hid out for lots and lots and lots of years, until he was the recipient of a house by virtue of an extended family member who had passed and left him a home in Dayton. And so
Okay.
he and his wife went back to Dayton, and that's where they were when I found him. And then I went through and started looking for records.
So it sounds like everything that you have done, and you've exhausted all of your
Legal
avenues.
remedies, yeah.
And you've exhausted all the courts as well. I mean, nothing else can be done. It's like case closed.
Well, not really.
Yeah, except you are not emotionally case closed. You still have,
Well,
there's no closure for
I'm
you.
still trying to find, a few of the last records, like you mentioned ballistics and everything.
Mhm.
And so, you know, everybody kept telling me that, what I had was what I had. Now, when our prosecutor got involved, and I love that man, he is just, to me, um, he's very noble and full of honor. The 3 records that I had turned into 103 records. So I'm really
Oh, wow.
pissed at the Columbus
Wow.
Police Department for not doing its job. Further, they tried to tell me that it was not an active case. Okay. Well, that's BS, Tamara, because it was an active case. Okay. So it remained an active case until we went, and tried to adjudicate the case. So I am still trying to find records, and they're out there. I know they are, because just recently, within the last few months, there have been more found.
So I call him a district attorney, but you're calling him a prosecutor.
Right.
Is your prosecutor saying that if you do find more evidence, then you can reopen this case? I thought it was completely
No, it's
against the Constitution.
It's closed. Yeah,
It's closed.
It's closed.
So you're doing this for your own emotional purposes at this point, right?
Well, yes.
I guess.
Yes, and because, I mean, let's face it, okay? While, the whole, I don't have any more legal remedies as far as, Mr. Hayes or anything. I want to know why it is that, the Columbus Police Department didn't want to cooperate with me, wouldn't give me records, that it's taken me 3 years to still amass more records, and the few that I'm missing, I want to know where they are. And
Yes. So this isn't over for you.
it's
You're
not over.
you're still on
No,
the
it's not over
prowl.
because Tamara, I could go into, but I'm not going to. I could go into some things and share with you that would blow, the minds of everybody. But there are still a few things that are missing that are huge holes, okay, in this case, which would probably explain too, maybe that whole snowball effect of why this man wasn't apprehended when those governor's warrants were issued for
Right.
extradition. So, so I still have gaping holes, a couple, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna make sure they're filled in.
Yeah, you need some closure. Everybody does. It's human nature to want closure to anything. But
Absolutely.
I mean, but even if it sounds like even if you get not the emotional closure, but if you get the records that you need, it's still like nothing can be done still because they
Well,
can't reopen anything.
no, but you know what I would like is once I get them, and I because there are some officers, among this, whole situation too, who aren't exactly, or haven't been exactly, free with information that they're privy to. But once I get everything together and I fill in those holes, I am going to work to get my dad some kind of posthumous, um, medal,
Yeah.
because he deserves it,
Absolutely.
and I want a public apology.
I see. So
And
that's
if
what you
if
want.
if for
Okay.
no other reason than that, then I will feel like my father's legacy wasn't one of being the guy that got shoved aside and nobody gave a damn about, and instead the perp's rights were more important than,
Right.
my dad's service and everything that he went through,
Hmm.
and eventually became discarded as far as I'm concerned. And they put him in a corner. I always describe it, and this is because this is the worst connotation that you can conjure up for an officer ever in your mind. But I always say they put him in a corner, sharpening pencils. Well, they
Hmm.
really didn't literally, but figuratively they did,
Hmm.
because at the point at which he was of no longer value, that's what they oftentimes do across the country,
Hmm.
is dispose of these officers, and I'll be damned. So, I'm a member of the Wounded Blue Foundation. I'm working with Randy Sutton to try to become the family peer leader, meaning, that any family members that go through, their loved ones' line of duty injury that's permanently disabling, I want to be there to help that family, because there wasn't anybody there to help me,
So
you know?
that's what your goal is right now then.
And that is the other half of my goal, besides getting my dad what he deserved
Hmm.
then,
Hmm.
and still deserves now, which is a legacy of being
Right. Right.
a really good police officer who served and protected these people. And I am in contact with one of the victims, the couple in whose yard these men were found. And she wrote a letter to our local newspaper, and found me and wanted to thank me because she explained how my dad saved her life and that of her husband's when he dove on top of them when gunfire was erupting in their backyard.
Wow. So you are a spark of fire, girl.
Listen,
You are.
I'm my father's daughter, and so I'm not one to give up, give in. They want me to go away, okay?
I'm sure. I'm sure. Now you're
And
going to write a book about all this, right?
I have been writing a book, Tamara.
Good. 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 Good.
Yeah,
You're going to have to keep me posted, keep
I would
everyone
love
posted
to.
on this
I would
book,
love to.
because I know there are a lot of people, a lot of listeners out there that want to read this book. You have an interesting story here. Now, we don't have time to get into it, but I later on want to talk to you about, or hear about in your book about like the bullets and the fragments they found and anything crime scene related, like where was the gun and all that stuff. So that stuff intrigues me just because of my
Of course,
CSI
you're a
background.
forensics. Yeah, you're a forensics expert. Well, and
So,
and and I'll be honest with you, all of that is another facet to this story
mhm,
that
mhm.
you personally would be fascinated by, but so would the audience too.
Right, right. But it sounds like even if they had all of the correct evidence that they needed at the time, it doesn't matter because no one followed through with the warrants. No one
Correct.
followed through with anything. And then all this time goes by and now it's, we're the
And
Constitution is
well,
more important than, well,
well,
I understand the Constitution is
I
important. I'm
understand
not,
the Constitution too, but
I get that.
can you imagine though, literally, um, a system that is created you know to protect us, but it didn't even protect the protector. You know,
Yeah,
it
right.
did
And
not protect the protector,
right, right. You're right.
and
Sad.
so
It's very sad.
it's very. I can't imagine a police officer being shot
I know.
and the perpetrator not being
I know.
apprehended
Right,
and charged and spending time in jail.
right, right.
He
And you
should
know
have
where
never
he's
gotten out
at.
of jail. Yeah,
Right.
but
Now another thing,
instead he got every privilege known to mankind.
and we don't have time. We're gonna have you on again, but your father was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder after this shooting. Obviously, that's why he didn't talk about it so much. I mean, and that's prevalent today. We see that so much
Exactly.
today. And
Exactly.
back then they didn't have a debriefing, I'm sure.
No.
They didn't have
No.
chaplains at the scene. They didn't
No.
have peer support. They didn't have any of that in place back then.
They expected that officer to buck up.
Just like we do now.
Yeah, exactly.
We've gotten better and we've improved a
We have a
lot,
long way to go.
but we have a long way to go. You're right. You're very right.
I remember the term, and I know we're running out of time, but I remember the term my father used, which was, I said, Dad, why don't you go talk to somebody about this? And he said, because I would be labeled a loose cannon.
Oh,
That was his terminology for it.
loose
And
cannon.
a loose cannon, and nobody would want to, partner with me. Nobody would have my
Aw.
back. and I would be considered weak, and my dad was, listen, remember, he tough football player,
Oh, I
tough
know.
guy,
Right.
that kind of stuff. But listen, the bottom line is everybody has emotions,
Of
and you
course.
can be as tough as, Ted on the outside. And that's usually the way I present myself. I'm like Teflon Donna, okay, is what I call myself. But on the inside, let's face it, I've got a heart, and a spirit that's broken.
And have you even done counseling needed for your heart? You were 9 years old when this happened. When you saw your mom on the phone and dropped to her knees. I mean, I know you're going to make me cry, but you were a little girl. Have you even come to terms with that and talked to anyone for your own emotional
No, I just figure,
welfare?
through the passage of time that, I'm so sorry. Gosh, I feel like a weak suck.
Time does not heal all wounds. Talking about things heals wounds, and sharing your story heals wounds.
I need to go back to my Teflon Donna identity. No, I haven't, because I just figure, gosh, this has been almost all my life.
Right.
How does one go back and try to become whole again over the course of 40 plus, over 4 decades? I don't know how you do that. I don't even think there's the best therapist in the world that can probably make me whole again. But what will make me whole again, Tamara, is to plug the holes, earn my father the medals that he deserves, and serve other people and families through Randy Sutton's organization, the Wounded Blue Foundation. I'm a content writer for Law Enforcement Today, and to do those things to be of service in my dad's honor. And those are the things that can help me.
You have just ended the podcast perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for everything that you're doing right now
My pleasure.
to bring this guy to justice, even though we can't physically bring him to justice,
right.
But you're bringing your heart to justice, and you're trying to heal from that. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
So welcome.
You're amazing. You're a spark of fire, girl.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. We are going to look forward to your book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me too, Tamara.
You're so welcome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for your service and sacrifice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. If you're enjoying the Real Life Podcast, I invite you to consider supporting it monetarily. Just 99 cents a month will go a long way to secure future podcasts. Where exactly does your money go? It pays the monthly fees to use the program to record the guests. I want to recognize and thank the following people for supporting the Real Life Podcast: Ron, Ben, Katie, Paul, Kelly, Anne, and Cammie. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll decide to support the Real Life Podcast. Just click on the podcast link that I post on Twitter and Facebook, then click on the box that reads support with a $sign. You're all amazing. See you next week.